Hey there, James Reiner here. As the NFL and the fantasy season kicks off this week, I thought I'd talk about my favorite players I've had on my team since 2011. So today, I'm counting down the top 5 players I've had since I've started playing. So come down and have a seat at the grown-up table. Start off, I have some honorable mentions. 2016 Antonio Brown, 2014 Odell Beckham Jr., 2015 Rob Gronkowski, and 2013 Jordy Nelson, and lastly 2016 Aaron Rodgers. All great players, all had great productive fantasy seasons for me, but did not quite make the list. Number 5, we have 2013 Matt Forte. He finished the season as the running back 3 on the year. He had 1,900 total yards, 12 total touchdowns, and 74 receptions. There were only 2 weeks where he was under double-digit fantasy points. He was the model of consistency. I've drafted him several years. He's always been a reliable back. He also had a great cameo in the league. Number 4, we have 2018 Todd Gurley. This is one of the most dominant fantasy seasons we've ever seen from a player. Sean McVay's highly efficient offense allowed him to produce and score touchdowns almost every game. He finished the fantasy season as a running back 1. He had 831 total yards, 21 total touchdowns, and 59 receptions. Through more than half the season, he did not have a game below 20 fantasy points in a half-point PPR. He only had 1 game on the entire fantasy season where he was under 10 points. What holds him back from being higher on this list for me is he had that knee issue later in the season. I didn't have him for week 16, and I was playing in the last place game in our league, and punishments were on the line, and he let me down, and I ended up having to do a last place punishment. Number 3, we have 2013 Josh Gordon. He finished the season as the wide receiver 1. He had 87 receptions, 1,600 yards, and 9 total touchdowns. Josh Gordon came out of nowhere. Before he exploded, I was able to pull off a trade for him where I traded a defense that was kind of hot at the time and 2 mediocre players. Not a lot of people were valuing him, so I was able to get him very low and great return on asset. A lot of leagues, he was probably just claimed off of waivers. Gordon just kept putting monster weeks together, and this was when we were still playing standard scoring, not PPR. PPR was not the standard at the time, and he was still getting monster games. He won a lot of critical games for me. I ended up having a great fantasy season in 2013, and Gordon was a huge part of that, as I did not have to spend a huge draft pick to get him. I just got the value straight up front. It's sad to see how his career turned out. If he could have kept it together, we may be referring to him as one of the best wide receivers of the decade, for sure. At number 2, we have 2019 Lamar Jackson. Well, just last year, he was the quarterback 1. He had 3,127 passing yards, 36 passing touchdowns, 1,200 rushing yards, and 7 touchdowns. You would be happy with just one of those for a quarterback or a running back, and he was putting up quarterback 1 and wide receiver 1 numbers every week for you. I drafted him in the 10th round, so a great return on value. He had only 1 week where he only scored 11 points. Other than that, it was week-winning games. He was one of the most exciting players to watch last year, so it was a ton of fun having him on my team. I'm hoping we can get some even better season out of him to come. I hope he's not just a one-year wonder, and teams just adjust to. So hopefully this 2020 fantasy season is even better. At number 1, I have 2012 Adrian Peterson. Finished the year as a running back 1. He had 2,097 rushing yards. This was the year he was 9 yards away from breaking the record. He had 200 receiving yards, 13 touchdowns, and 29 receptions. This is a year where he was covering from a torn ACL and just had surgery in the offseason. A lot of people were afraid to draft him, so his ADP actually fell, and I was able to get him in the 3rd round. That was even considered high at the time for taking him. The league even makes a joke about this. Drafting AP anytime before the 3rd round is crazy. Only 1 player has ever recovered from a torn ACL and had a successful season the next year, and that was Deuce McAllister, and he was 22 years old at the time. Adrian Peterson, this guy carried me to the fantasy finals that year. He was dominant on the field. Every time he touched it, you thought he might take it to the house for a touchdown. It was his MVP year. he's had a great career and he's still playing at a high level, but it's sad that the Washington football team just cut him. I'm a Washington football team fan. I would like to still see him play. I still think he can do it at a high level as a backup and nothing else. But just a great year of fantasy football for me. So Adrian Peterson obviously comes in at number 1. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this, we're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I'm sure there's more content out there that you would enjoy. Find us on Twitter. And remember, subscribe, grow up, and get guff.